From a life-altering diagnosis
I don't know if I'll ever be able to sing this again like I used to.
to a life-affirming performance,
That's what I want to be.
Lulu brought it all today. It was amazing. Just goosebump inducing.
You can't know how I've missed you.
music has always been a guiding light for one young star.
I don't think that I would have survived without music.
This week on Open Record,
It's gonna happen
a milestone wish granted
sometime.
through the magic of music. From the Fox 6 studios, this is Open Record. I am Bryan Polcyn, and I'm joined this week, as always, by Open Record's executive producer, Sarah Smith. Hey, Sarah.
Hi.
Welcome back to the show. And, of course, we are once again joined by Fox 6 Wake Up News anchor, Carl Deffenbaugh. Hey, Carl.
Hey, guys. Great to be back.
Glad to have you back, and so soon, because you've got another great one to talk about today.
So soon,
No, I don't know,
another
so soon.
story.
Not in a negative way. I mean, I'm glad you're back so soon because this is another good one to talk about. How did that come off as not good? I don't know. It just somehow
You're back
did.
again.
We are recording this episode on Wednesday, April 10th for release on Thursday, April 11th. And today we are celebrating a major milestone for one of the most successful charitable organizations in our state, Make-A-Wish Wisconsin, and the impact Make-A-Wish has on kids like Lulu Altman facing critical illness. We'll talk about that and more after this. All right, so we are talking about a milestone wish granted for Lulu Altman. I want to start with, Carl, just tell us a little bit about Lulu, how you came to meet her and some of her story.
It's one of those fun things that just kind of comes randomly in our business sometime. You stumble across a great story like this. We had Make-A-Wish in studio for Wake Up back last year when they were doing their telethon, and we were previewing some of the events of the day. And just in chatting with their communications director at the time, I said, we're always looking for great stories, would be interested in doing more with you. And he mentioned off the top of his head that this year, 2024, was going to be Make-A-Wish Wisconsin's 40th year in the state, and they were celebrating a milestone 8,000th wish. So already my brain's kind of turning a little bit. Love a round number, love a chance to celebrate an organization like that. Well, it turns out the wish that happened to be number 8,000 was this just incredibly over-the-top performance planned with Lulu Altman. So I learned more and more about this teenager who's 18 now at the time of the performance, but for years, going back basically a decade, has been dealing with really serious medical issues, while at the same time, she is this incredible singer. And her dream, her wish, and we'll get into much more with Make-A-Wish and all the different dreams they make come true for these kids, was to sing with a full orchestra. So again, storyteller, the brain kind of starts ticking here. Okay, you get the glitz and the glam of this performance downtown. You get this milestone for this organization, all of it kind of coming together in what hopefully you enjoyed as a good piece.
Well, and Lulu, she didn't just wake up 6 months ago and go, I really just want to sing with the orchestra. She's been singing her whole life, basically.
Going back to when she was 2, her mom said that she had pretty much perfect pitch and was just constantly singing, was in love with music. She had a grandmother who was really involved in the art scene here in Milwaukee that kind of guided her, I believe took her to Sound of Music when she was a kid. And that first realization that could actually be part of your life, that could be a profession maybe down the road, really stuck with her. So she, again, was singing since she was a young child. She started voice lessons professionally when she was 8, which is really early.
I dreamed that love would never die.
Professional
amazing.
voice lessons at 8.
Yes, and has been
So
part
this is not like me singing into the steering wheel.
No.
Same.
All right.
And again, going into the story, I mean, Make-A-Wish will make a dream come true for any kid, right? So you don't have to be a amazing singer
Right.
for this orchestra performance to come true. They would have made the wish happen no matter what. But then we go to the rehearsals that she was doing with the Milwaukee Youth Symphony Orchestra, and I hadn't heard her sing before. And she opens her mouth, and it's just incredible. You are blown away by how good this teenage voice is.
The atmosphere as thrilling here as always.
Now, of course, Make-A-Wish doesn't just make wishes come true for anyone. These are obviously children who are dealing with life-threatening critical illnesses. So take us back in time a little bit and tell us about Lulu's story. So she's young, she's got these pipes, her mom notices she's got perfect pitch, but then there's obviously some things that come up medically for her. Tell us a little bit about
Yeah, I have, unfortunately, pages of notes from her mom about the different ups and downs of her health journey. Very complicated series of tests and, months to years of doctors not really knowing what was going on. But it does kind of all tie into music again, which was sort of a theme for the piece. But they were on a trip to New York City to go to Broadway and see Les Mis when she was, I believe, 9 years old. All excited, of course, a musical fan. And while they were in New York, she got this nosebleed, and she had some odd bruising that they noticed too, but this nosebleed didn't stop for 2 days while they're on this trip. Obviously concerning, alarming. They go to the hospital in New York, and she wasn't able to fly home until the nosebleed stopped days later. That led to a whole series of tests, and at the time they thought eventually that she had this autoimmune disease where her blood wasn't clotting, so it was very difficult for it to stop clotting. She did test after test after test and ended up needing chemotherapy and some other treatments to finally get to the root of what they thought was the issue here.
Was there, and I hate to put it this way, was there a name for it? Was it an unknown autoimmune disease?
Brian,
do we know? Okay.
I was hoping you weren't going to ask me. ITP is what they go with for idiopathic thrombocytopenia purpura.
Okay, so an everyday thing we all know about.
Yes. So again, an autoimmune disease is incredibly rare, but basically it attacks the platelets in your blood. So that was the issue with the clotting. It led to a series of internal bleeding. I mean, she could have potentially bled out internally if they hadn't gotten to the root cause of this eventually. So they find basically a stabilizing treatment for this. She's okay for years after that. And then a couple years ago, she starts to have all of these really severe headaches, migraines, things like that. Again,
this was now as like a teenager?
Yeah, as a teenager. I believe around like 16 or so. And so again, she goes in, and this is odd for the doctors, especially trying to solve this mystery, because everything that was the case the first time around is the opposite now. So the issue was that her blood wasn't clotting before. This time around, it turns out she had a blood clot in her brain. So her blood is clotting too much, basically, in this case. So again, I'm not the doctor here. I have another very long list of names, and thrombosis was the blood clot in the brain. Antiphospholipid antibody syndrome, APS, is what they eventually got to a diagnosis
Thank goodness
with.
for acronyms.
Yeah, right? Yeah. And eventually, and again, this is after months and months of testing, and as a kid going through constant blood draws, sometimes 3, 4, 5 a day, if you think about that from a perspective. Her mom in the story spoke to the fact that, so many people, her mom included, hate needles, don't like doing blood draws. This is a child who is doing these daily. She's basically gone, the longest she's ever gone since this more recent diagnosis was a month without a blood draw in her life. And eventually, they finally get to this root cause, which is lupus, which struck me. If you're a fan of the show House from back in the day, there was sort of a joke, it's never lupus. Well, for her, it was lupus.
Yeah.
And again, not a medical professional here, but it's an autoimmune disease where basically your body's immune system is attacking your own body. So it's going at your own systems in a way that's incredibly damaging. She spoke to basically walking down the hallway was exhausting. Getting out of her bed was exhausting. Singing, certainly, where you have to have breath.
My first thought
like
was
that.
that she sing.
Yeah.
With
So
energy,
initially, when she was again 9 or 10 years old, she was able to come back to singing, continue to do really well. She was in all these competitions and excellent musical theater future. And then when this most recent incident hit a couple years ago, she had to stop. And all of this was kind of taken away, which we get to in the piece a little bit as she tells her story through song. Eventually, though, this lupus diagnosis also led to an issue with the kidneys, because, again, it attacks different parts of your body. So probably the most serious part of this, again, decade-long medical journey she's been on, she had basically kidney failure. So they had a biopsy of her kidney. The numbers were off there. They had to do something. The biopsy led to a rupture, and then she was rushed to the ER for emergency surgeries. There were a number of follow-ups, including, again, internal bleeding. Her lungs were filled with fluid. She needed multiple transfusions. And getting back to the music, for a while she was on a very serious breathing treatment where she could not physically breathe on her own,
Can't sing
let
if you
alone
can't breathe.
sing.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right. What really, and I mean, I know you watched the story too, what really struck me, I think one of the great moments in watching this was the video of her as she's coming through those treatments and she's sitting in the hospital and she starts to sing again. That voice.
Yeah.
Just as she sits there in a hospital chair and the voice comes out. I wonder for the people working in the hospital, maybe the nurses down the hall, what it was like to hear a voice like that.
It gives me goosebumps even just remembering that piece of the story right now. She told her story so beautifully through these different songs that we featured in the piece, kind of the rise, the love of music, the fall as it's taken away, and this one song in particular that was kind of her return. She didn't think, probably the most emotional part of the piece is when she didn't think she'd be able to sing one of her most favorite songs ever again because of her breathing issues. And then finally the voice starts to come back. She's able to work on it in basically a bathroom, a room in the hospital with this nurse. And her mom spoke to the amazing programs they have at Children's beyond the medical side of it, but there was a music therapy program. So that video you're referring to, a woman would bring in a keyboard and just play with Lulu. And anyone who's passionate about something can know what that can do for your overall well-being. If it's what you love and you get it back and you're able to do something positive, something good to hold on to, what that can mean physically for you.
Well, being in a hospital multiple times is difficult and mentally challenging for anyone. But now you're a kid and now you're going through this and you're going to the hospital and doctor's offices and appointments and blood draws and stuff like that. So to have an outlet like that maybe they're not sitting doing crossword puzzles, but to have an outlet like music that works so many different parts of your brain more than just, I'm just trying to pass the time.
She had an interesting comment that we ended up not using in the piece about her age. So she's 18 now. She's an adult and going off to college. And maybe some people would think, well, Make-A-Wish, that's supposed to be for kids, right? You take little kids to Disney or something like that. And granted, she's been going through this since she was a little kid. But she spoke to how it almost hits you harder when you are a teenager. You're getting more of an understanding of the world. You realize what you're missing out on, what you're losing out on. You're not having the childhood or the teenage experience that so many others are, except for what some of those programs are able to try to recreate for you along the way.
Well, you talked about, we saw her singing, there's the music therapy program, and so the dream comes back alive, the dream of singing in front of an orchestra. And when we're going to take a break. When we come back, I want to talk about the big performance. I know you were there for that. We saw some of that in the story, but we're going to talk about that when we come right back. Okay, so Lulu is starting to sing again. She's in the hospital. The voice is coming back. She's going through all this music therapy. Let's talk about the wish. She still has this dream of singing in front of an orchestra. And how does the idea come about to say, let's make this happen?
It's the beauty of Make-A-Wish because she came up with this and started the very early stage of the process, getting connected with the organization when she still did not have the lung capacity to sing. So she knew what she had lost out on. She knew what she used to have, but she hadn't gotten that back yet. But she still had this dream. And I think that's something that we'll get into much more about Make-A-Wish, just the almost carrot it puts, the line out there for you to chase if you're going through these really difficult circumstances. So she had something to look forward to, had something to work towards along the way. And eventually Make-A-Wish gets her connected with the Milwaukee Youth Symphony Orchestra, a wonderful organization where these are high school students just like Lulu, incredibly talented. I'm not a music pro here, but you walk into the rehearsal and you're like, this is the most amazing orchestra I've heard here in Milwaukee. So she goes through a series of rehearsals with them. The interesting thing about that, too, for all of this love of music throughout her life, she doesn't read music. Sheet music. She doesn't actually read the notes. She does it.
What?
Yeah, right?
All through ear?
All through ear.
That's amazing.
She's never actually learned how to fully read music, but now you're combining it with dozens of her peers in this well-tuned orchestra and trying to combine kind of her more go with the flow sense of it with the actual full orchestra. So over a series of about 4 weeks, they practice, they work, they hone this, and it all builds up to this performance at the Warner Grand Theater downtown Milwaukee.
Did she pick the songs? I know you had kind of alluded to the fact that like the songs that she was singing and chose kind of helped tell a story. So she clearly put some thought into it. It wasn't just like eeny, meeny, miny, mo and let them pick three
There's
songs.
a Stephen Sondheim quote I use in the piece about every performer brings to their performance something more. So there's the words on the page, there's the production quality, but the actual performer itself brings their whole history to a performance, whether that's a musical, whether that's a song. In this case, Lulu very particularly picked 4 songs that kind of followed her health journey. And I didn't even realize this going into the interview. And then she just kind of went into what each of those songs meant so deeply to her at different phases of her life. The director of the Youth Symphony Orchestra spoke to that as well, that the first rehearsal they did, he hears her voice and says, okay, this is going to be something. This is going to be good. But now it's about her actually telling her songs, bringing that to the audience through the performance.
Let's talk about the performance, because you go there and you're in this theater and there's the rehearsals, the warming up. Tell me about the environment there. What was the atmosphere like, and what was Lulu like leading up to it? Was she nervous? Was she excited? Did she seem confident? Tell me about that.
She is such a confident young woman. It's really impressive. But I think finally there was some nerves. The rehearsals and stuff, she seemed to handle pretty well. Just, this is where I belong. I should be singing. This is what I've dreamed of. But I think there was a moment, they ended up getting her to the theater earlier, the Warner Grand Theater downtown, this beautiful space that's been transformed more recently for the symphony orchestra. She's backstage. She has her dressing room. She's in this absolutely gorgeous ball gown. There's diamonds that were rented or borrowed for her from a shop in town. She gets in a limo to drive around the front and then gets to walk down this entryway with all kinds of people there screaming her name, shouting, signs, some close family and friends, others complete strangers, whether from the symphony, which was celebrating its founders concert, or from Make-A-Wish. They had, I believe, more than 1,000 people in this audience to listen to her sing.
To perform in front of 1,000 people for anyone would be either terrifying or a huge thrill. Obviously, this was a dream for her. How did the audience react to her?
I think, as you would expect, it was over the moon, right? So the symphony played a full concert. They did 2 songs, and they kind of told people ahead of time how special this was going to be. 2 songs, and then Lulu came out to sing her 4 before intermission. And after she's done, there's applause throughout, but after she's done, it is an immediate standing ovation, raucous in there, shouts. She brought down the house.
Did you talk to her after?
Absolutely, of course. Yeah, that's where.
So what did she? Yeah, how was she?
Again, she's a relatively level-headed kid, right? And then she just says, that was insane. It was beyond her wildest dreams. Just absolutely loved every moment of it.
What I think about, and you alluded to this earlier, that I think when we think of Make-A-Wish, we think of younger children, maybe someone in a wheelchair, someone who's on machinery of some kind, and maybe if they were going to sing, they'd sing a few bars and everyone would go, well, that was really great. They got to live their sort of dream. If you didn't tell someone this was someone who was being granted a wish, you would just think, she's a great singer in front of an orchestra.
She's the featured singer for this concert
What
today.
it tells me, though, is these wishes come in all shapes and sizes, right?
Yeah. The other thing I love about learning and kind of diving deep into this is, okay, so Make-A-Wish is there in the build-up, right? She's kind of getting her through a lot of those difficult parts. There'd be a random gift arrives from them this week, or a sign or some kind of message from them along the way to kind of keep her going. Her mom, though, spoke to the fact that the concert itself, all the build-up to the wish, is really only the beginning. And her mother, Marjorie, I thought really kind of opened my eyes to this. The wish then opens up her future. So she loves music. This has been her life, but she wants it to continue to be her life. And an experience like that is certainly going to motivate her and kind of push her forward to, okay, what can I really do with this? I've had this taste. How do I continue to chase this dream?
What does she want to do?
Well, she's going to MATC for music occupation to get into the business. She might even learn how to read music as part of the classes there. And then she doesn't specifically know, but she wants music to be her life, her profession in some capacity going forward.
And what are the prospects that she'll be able to continue to follow that with her health journey along the way?
I think good. I mean, her mom spoke to this as well. She has a critical illness. Lupus does not have a cure at this point, so this is something she lives with and deals with on a daily basis. Those blood draws and those tests continue, and doctors think that they have a decent grasp on it now, but there are very strict numbers basically for where her tests need to come in. And if they're any little bit, close to the edge or over one way or the other, then it's different treatments. Then it's trying to keep things status quo. And she kind of spoke to it a little bit. It kind of comes in phases, almost like remission with cancer, but they term it differently with this. And she can kind of feel when it's coming on stronger. And she almost described just her day-to-day life, kind of like that experience we have when we're getting the flu, when you're kind of coming into something and, okay, my head feels off. I'm a little like out of it, so to speak. I'm in a fog.
Yeah.
And she's constantly in that. That's kind of her best days.
Right.
And it's how you manage that and deal with the lower points too.
Which tells you how important it is to have something like this to work on, to look forward to, what that does for her health has got to be just immeasurable.
Yeah, absolutely. And
So-
we'll see how it carries through.
We've talked a lot about Make-A-Wish and Lulu's journey, but it is one of, as you said, 8,000 over the 40 years that Make-A-Wish Wisconsin has been around. When we come back, we are going to be joined by Make-A-Wish Wisconsin President Patty Gorski, who's going to tell us all about the organization, its past, its present, and its future when we come right back. All right, so we've been talking about Make-A-Wish Wisconsin and particularly Lulu Altman's journey to singing in front of the Milwaukee Symphony Orchestra, but it is one of literally 8,000 wishes that have been granted here in Wisconsin over the past 40 years. And joining us now is the CEO of Make-A-Wish Wisconsin, Patty Gorski. Patty, thank you so much for joining us and spending time here on Open Record.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
So obviously Lulu Altman's performance was fantastic and Carl's telling of the story was incredible, but it's just the tip of the iceberg. Tell us about the organization, how it started, and how things are going.
Well, Make-A-Wish in Wisconsin is 40 years old this year, and so it's really exciting that we're celebrating our 40th birthday. Make-A-Wish, the organization, the concept was founded in 1980 in Phoenix, Arizona, and it was inspired by a little boy named Chris Gracious who wished to be a state trooper, a police officer for a day, and a bunch of regular citizens who had ties in the law enforcement field gathered together, and they granted an amazing wish. And Chris did die shortly after his wish of leukemia. And after that, his mother and some of these law enforcement people said, well, there's lots of sick kids. We can do this for others. And that's how the concept of Make-A-Wish was born. And then morph it forward over 40 years later. Make-A-Wish in America is there are 58 chapters within Make-A-Wish America and its territories with the United States, and 40 international affiliates granting wishes in more than 50 countries and 6 continents. So it's huge. It's a global phenomenon.
So I think, Patty, if people know when they hear Make-A-Wish, they know that you're doing amazing work and that it's typically children and then their families that are dealing with these medical conditions. But can you explain a little bit how Make-A-Wish works? And, I know in this instance, was it her Lulu's doctors that
her
said, hey,
doctors
you should reach
recommended
out?
her. But then, Patty, you can speak to this. There's basically a representative from Make-A-Wish that is with her through that entire process, working with her on the concept of the wish and how it pays off.
Sure. We grant wishes for kids ages 2.5 to 18. They can be referred to us through the medical professionals mostly, but parents call, sometimes even the kids as teenagers, they hear about it. They all talk in the hospitals and they call and refer themselves. But ultimately, the treating physician has to sign off on the child's medical eligibility. And once the child is deemed medically eligible, we go about making magic for them.
Well, it's funny
We work
you
with our-
use that word magic, and I know I think of this, Patty. When my son was a little boy, I remember for Christmas I was asking, what do you want? He was writing a letter to Santa, and he said, I really want magic. He wanted to be able to do magic, and I thought, man, that's a great wish. But I've got to find some other options for him or he's going to be really disappointed at Christmas. Obviously, not every wish is possible. How do you determine what's possible? I mean, can a child wish for anything? Are there limitations? How do you determine what you can do?
Well, we always encourage kids to dream and dream big within good sense. We try to make it all happen. We always try to err on the side of the child and to try to find a way to say yes. That being said, when Lulu came to us, we were like, okay, what do we do? How do we figure this out here? We started, my amazing team, they're very creative, and we just sat down and brainstormed a little bit and said, okay, who do we know in town? How can we start pulling in favors? Who's got, the talent and the time and that type of thing? And really, MISO came to mind immediately because it's such an outstanding organization. And in addition to that, we thought it would be really cool, like service learning for the kids in the orchestra to understand one of their peers dealing with really tough stuff and helping make a wish come true. And Had it been any other orchestra, which would have been solid and wonderful as well, it may not have been as meaningful because these kids, 100+ musicians strong, poured their hearts and souls into it for one of their peers. How cool is that?
You talk about, oh, we have to pull strings. I have to imagine, because I like to think everyone is good-hearted, that when you start to reach out to these people, they have to go, oh, well, yeah, we'll do that and we'll do this. And then, oh, I know another person, and then we'll be able to do this for them too. That has to happen, right?
That's exactly what MISO did. And, I mean, like anybody with capacity constraints and things like that, I mean, sometimes we can't pull it off, but then we go to plan B, and we're really good about, the jigsaw puzzle, and you put the piece here, and if it doesn't work, you put another piece, and, and ultimately it will all come to fruition. Even the most simple of wishes, we spin to make sure that there's the magic in there, and there's the creativity, and there's the wonder that is helping the child focus not on his or her medical condition, but on possibilities and the hope, strength, and joy that a wish come true, a dream to fulfillment can bring.
Patty, I've kind of maybe a little bit of a different question for you and for the people who actually work for Make-A-Wish or doing this on a day-to-day basis, not just kind of like me dropping in for one of these wishes along the way. I'd be really curious about the mentality and kind of emotional strength that you have to have, where on the one hand, you are providing potentially a life highlight to these kids, to their families to experience together. But on the other hand, that comes with a very serious side of it. Many of these kids, like you said, with the initial kid, do not survive. They are dealing with these absolutely serious illnesses. How do you guys balance the highest of highs with also sometimes having to go through these lows with the families as well?
It's hard. I mean, we cry a lot. It's not your average workplace, I'll tell you that. But I think you guys know that I was a former colleague at TV6 at FOX6 many, many years ago. This is my 25th anniversary as CEO of Make-A-Wish Wisconsin now. But I was not sure I was going to even apply for the job when it came open, because I wasn't sure that I could handle the sadness, and I thought I'd be crying all the time as a person who wears her heart on her sleeve. But ultimately, I decided that the fulfillment would be greater than the tough stuff, which is true. And I don't want to sound Pollyanna-ish, because that won't work, but you just try to focus on the good. You try to focus on the positive things. So no matter what the situation is going to be, and what the outcome is going to be, you're often the only good thing or one of the best things that's happening, because no matter what, you're creating memories for the child and his or her family, and good stuff during often the most dark and troubling times of their lives.
I don't think anyone would object to a child who is facing a terminal illness having that one incredible moment, because that's, you're giving them a thing that is that one moment of joy. What I wonder though is, does it go beyond that one moment? Is there any research that suggests that this actually is having a positive impact on some of these kids and their health? I mean, we talked about Lulu and what the process of preparing for this this performance has done for her. Do you see that with other kids? I know some it may not matter. The medical challenge is just too great, but do you see a positive impact beyond just that one moment?
Sure, sure, and absolutely. And one of the things I will say is that we don't use the word terminal because, suffice it to say, a child who was diagnosed with leukemia 20, 30, 40 years ago, the odds were much greater that the child wouldn't make it. And today, 90% of those kids live, so we critical illness or life-threatening is what it is. And, the doctors, medical providers, they have often observed and anecdotally have shared that a wish provides so much positive impact and helps a child's physical and emotional well-being and overall their quality of life. But research has showed that those kids who have a wish build the physical and emotional strength that they need to fight. Again, no matter what the outcome is, but often, whether it's prolonging or adding quality of life, it is uh, proven.
I know this one was such a show-stopping event for you guys, this grand performance in downtown Milwaukee with a full orchestra. I think, too, about some of the quiet moments, watching Lulu's mom, Marjorie, during rehearsal when she was, for one of the first times, getting to see her daughter's dream fulfilled with this orchestra playing behind her, and that was before the performance. I'd be curious for you, Patty, what some of those moments are that stick with you over, like you said, 25 years, whether it's some of the grand ones you've been able to pull off, or maybe something that came together last minute, or maybe those quiet moments with a family.
That's a beautiful question. Thank you for asking that. There's so many that are indelibly imprinted on my brain of kids and the resilience that you see and the beautiful families. I mean, they're all going through hell. I mean, suffice it to say, if you're eligible for a wish, it's not a good thing. And so, I have a lot of stories and a lot of beautiful families I've stayed close to over the years just because they've imprinted. When I started in this role, I only knew one wish kid and his family. And it was a young boy who wished for a basement redo because he had had a bone marrow transplant and he had to be in isolation. And that wish, stayed with me. Unfortunately, Michael passed away literally the week I started here. But to this day, his mother and his sister, and now his nieces and nephews, who he never got to know, but his extended family, they are all involved in Make-A-Wish to this day. They've continued to work on Walk for Wishes and other events and things like that, raising funds so they can help pay it forward. So it's and I can count it, multiple hands, and the number of kids in their families who either want to pay it forward to whatever ability they have and desire to pay it forward, and just kind of the help. And again, a lot of them are the quiet ways, like you said, Carl, just that just really are just powerful. One of the greatest gifts is the gift of perspective. And Make-A-Wish provides that. And I can tell you, I can speak to every one of my staff will agree, and our volunteers, that it helps keep life in perspective.
Is there anything over the years? I mean, if somebody comes to you with a wish and you go, okay, we can't do that, but what if we tried this? For example, if a small child says, I want to play in the NBA Finals with Giannis, that's not going to happen. But you go, okay, we can't do that, but maybe we can get you courtside seats, or maybe we can get you
Absolutely.
a little moment with Giannis where you get to shoot a little one-on-one, something like that. Is that what you do when someone comes to you with a wish? You go, we'd love to make that happen, but there's no way.
Yeah, how about I want to go to the moon?
Well, and actually, I could.
But how about
Yeah.
space camp?
I could see people saying, "I want to fly to space with Elon Musk. Make
Yeah.
it happen." Okay, maybe we're not going to be able to do that because of
Right.
your medical condition, or Elon's not going to give us space in a spaceship. But what do you do at that point?
Space camp is an amazing opportunity, and we brainstorm. I mean, each one of my wish coordinators who work with the volunteers who act as liaisons with the kids and his or her family, they're a powerful team that works together to figure out the creative aspect of what we can actually implement. But I one of the most powerful things is just it's kind of like, who do you know and who can we pull favors from? And that's how we make
Networking.
stuff happen.
So, Patty, I know you're talking about some of the limitations, and you talked about how those families are giving back in raising funds for Make-A-Wish. We, as FOX6, recently held, in conjunction with you guys, the airline miles donation drive. And obviously the need is there because a lot of these wishes aren't in
Local,
downtown
yeah.
Milwaukee.
This one happened to be
This
close.
one happened to
yeah.
be close. Yeah, but there's ones that they're flying because they want to go to Hawaii, or they want to do something in Australia. And so these wishes aren't free. And so can you talk a little bit about, where some of those donations come from and how important it is for people to understand that?
Well, thank you for that question. We raise between like $9 and $10 million a year to grant all these wishes, over 400 annually. We've got over 500 kids in Wisconsin alone will be diagnosed with a critical illness annually. So it's the need is there, and so we raise funds in all sorts of ways, whether they are events or individual giving, business, corporate giving, grants, that kind of thing. Your airline miles campaign for us was wonderful because in-kind support is amazing for us as well. Often, we pay for a lot of airline tickets. It's one of the biggest expenses of the organization during the course of a year. And so for us to be able to have airline miles donated and then to turn around and use those to book flights for kids and their families is invaluable. You helped us raise over 1 million miles this year alone, and you've done it for a number of years. So
Yeah,
thank you
that's
so
awesome.
much for that.
A lot of this has been a celebration of the organization. I think we can celebrate Patty a little bit too, because they announced recently, Patty, that you'll be retiring next year, 2025, after you said already 25 years, another one still to come. But you mentioned 400 wishes a year. When you took over in 1999, it was just over 100. So really exponential growth for the organization over your quarter century. Where do you hope it goes from here? What do you think the next steps are for Make-A-Wish with someone else leading the way?
Yeah, it's been a labor of love and privilege to be able to do this work. You know what? I hope they get every single eligible child. So, right now we're at just over 400 wishes annually. And COVID did a number. So digging out, we're finally back to, pre-COVID numbers. But, in addition to that, with over 500 kids annually who are diagnosed with a critical illness, we hope we reach every single medically eligible child and then are able to help grant wishes, within Wisconsin and support other chapters that need the help to be able to make sure that these kids don't have to wait for wishes, because unfortunately some of our kids don't have the luxury of waiting.
Well, Patty Gorski, thank you so much for your time here on Open Record and your time serving Make-A-Wish Wisconsin. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to go off the record when we come right back. And it is time for us to go off the record. This is the part of the podcast where we get a little more casual and have a little fun by answering a question for which we have not prepared, but you know who has?
Moi.
She has. Okay, so.
Okay. So I know this is something that Bryan has talked about, how this should be an off-the-record question like 7 times.
Am I really?
We're talking about...
So you are prepared.
We're talking about tipping. We're talking about counter-only transactions.
I do have thoughts.
They swivel
Am I
the
going to get
iPad.
slammed, though, for giving my thoughts?
You will.
I might. Okay. All right.
That's Bryan,
Cancel
B-R-Y. When the iPad offers the 20, 25, 30% tipping, and you personally have done the work, what do you think?
I mean, go ahead, Carl, because I could talk for a long time about this.
Oh boy. Okay. I think honestly, I play things very safe and just do 20% across the board because it's safer that way. And this is a very in-depth conversation, probably, as Bryan's kind of alluding to. So much change, I think, during the pandemic too. You got a sense for how these people were trying to make ends meet when it comes to the service industry and wanting to support and keep that going. I think has continued for me post-pandemic, where that money, if you break it down, is going to mean a lot more percentage-wise to those people on the receiving end than maybe a couple dollars, depending on the percentages on my end. So I try to just do across the board 20%. I will say, maybe Bryan's going to kind of allude to this, the one that got me recently, I was at one of those places with those new beer walls, like self-pour beer walls. Right. And, had a couple beers, all of it done myself. And then at the end, there was a 15% service charge, and you could add an additional tip to that. And that was the first one where I was like, wait a second.
I'm tipping myself.
Right. Yeah, the service was me. So
Is
that
the drawer
one
gonna
got
pop
me.
open
But
for me?
if it's a coffee shop, if it's pretty much anything across the board, I just try to think of people in an industry that is not the most lucrative and not the most helpful to them. And
Look at you.
I want to preface this by saying I am a generous tipper.
Yes.
I believe in tipping generously, and I never want to be, and I've never been, even if the service wasn't great, that person's working hard. Mm-hmm. They probably have bills to pay and things that, they wouldn't be working this job if they could, be a CEO somewhere. So I'm a generous tipper. I think the problem I have, or the concern I have, have is the automatic expectation that for anything that uses a credit card, there's going to be a tip option, especially when I think of someone who is working their tail off in a restaurant, and they're going to get the same tip as the person who did nothing more than process my credit card and hand me something that was already pre-made. I think, is that really fair to the person who's working really hard at the service job that they're sweating and on their feet all day versus the one who just handed me the prepackaged thing and spun the thing around?
And I do think businesses have started to take advantage of that, where they can build in the assumption of a
That's
tip
the other
to
concern.
wages.
Yeah.
And I wish it was just a flat, pay your workers, charge me a little bit more for the
feels
food,
like a
and eliminate
subsidy
tipping.
to the business to say, well, we don't have to pay so much because they're going to get a bunch of these automatic credit card tips. That is another, I think, potential concern. Maybe that's just me making myself feel better about it. I still, most of the time though, and here's the thing that it comes down to. I don't know about you. I still end up usually tipping anyway, even though I'm sort of turned off by it. This is a human experience. I'm going to be honest with you. The last thing you want, some of the people who are more responsible, I guess, maybe servers, they don't want to make you feel bad. They'll look away at that moment.
Yeah.
So they're not like watching you, but I still feel like they're going to know.
Oh, they
They're
absolutely
gonna
know.
definitely
Well,
know.
and especially
And
when they go, well, they're okay. You're gonna have 2 question prompts, and I'm like, oh, here we go. Here's
So
the
is
tipping
it
thing.
bad? So that I wonder is like sort of, is the Lord watching from above that in knowing that I only tipped out of guilt, not because I felt they deserved it.
I'll
Like
pray
Carl's
for
going,
you.
oh, you know what? They really need that couple of bucks. And I go, he's going to see me. And so I'm still tipping, but
You
is it
know
for the
what?
wrong reasons?
Yeah. Well, it does. At the end of the day, it's cash money. So whether you feel like you're doing it out of necessity or out of the kindness of your heart, you just tip
Sarah,
them
this seems cold that on
$2.10.
an episode about the beauty of Make-A-Wish and this wonderful organization, we end with this.
Cancel, Sarah.
I've got a good one.
I was at, I don't know where I was. It was, well, I'm not going to name names, but I was at a restaurant having, it was a breakfast restaurant, and they had like mimosas that were pre-poured that are, from a mix. So they didn't mix the drinks. They're pre-poured. They're sitting there in champagne flutes. And there was a long wait for breakfast. And so I said, hey, I'll go we'll grab a couple of mimosas. And I ordered, and the person turned around, grabbed 2 glasses, handed them to me, ran my credit card, flipped it around, and one of the options was 30%. And it would have been a $6 tip. And I thought,
Maybe they made those earlier that day.
Yeah, maybe they fresh squeezed
Maybe.
the
It
OJ.
takes
You
a
don't
while.
know.
maybe. But in that moment, I was like, $6. And then I tipped $6.
Oh.
I mean, actually, I probably tipped like whatever 25%, because I think the options were 20, 25, and 30, and you go, all right, well.
Sarah and Kale noticeably silent on
I was
their
at
answers.
a concert this past summer buying a t-shirt and the whole iPad flipped over tips for buying a t-shirt, and I said no.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
not a right. I agree with that.
Kale doesn't care about the t-shirt stand workers.
They didn't make those shirts. They literally, you're like, I want.
had to get 'em out of the
I
box.
want
They had to
that
hang 'em on the
I want
display.
that one. He grabs it, hands
So
it to you.
the whole like tipping for stuff, like you said, they're not really making it. They might have made it earlier in the day. We don't know.
The t-shirts or the mimosas?
The mimosas,
Yeah.
the whatever. Like if it's
Quick turnaround
if it
of
is
those
some
shirts.
sort of service industry and you're getting some sort of consumable or
Yes.
something, I still will tip. It might not be the
Same.
full 20%.
And I do think that, yes, did Johnny just process my card while Becky's in back busting her hump making my latte? Maybe. But I have to think in my head that maybe Johnny at some point is going to be making lattes. And so at the end of the day, and I was in
No,
the
Johnny
service-
picked register for a reason.
Johnny's struggling. Johnny needs that $2.10. So, I mean, as someone who was in the service industry, I served, I bartended, I did beer cart on a golf course. Tips are
Lifeblood.
lifeblood. I
Of
mean,
course.
it's
I've delivered
money.
pizzas.
Yeah,
Believe me, I
right.
loved getting tips.
So, you know what? To Carl's point, and I hate myself for it, but like, I don't know. I'm okay that you're gonna get this $1.40 off of this $6 drink or whatever it is.
This
And
iPad
I'm
thing would have been great when I was Chuck E. Cheese and I could just walk around with it on birthday parties.
if they ever have a ring the bell because you tipped, would you ring the bell even though you didn't tip? Just because you
no.
Of course.
Bad karma, bro.
I wouldn't either.
I don't
just
wanna
wonder-
draw
I wonder how
attention
many
to
people-
myself.
How many? Oh, that's a good point. I wonder how many people do it. Anyway, all right, enough of that question. We're going to take one more break and wrap things up when we come right back.
Honored, trusted, respected. The Fox 6 Investigators.
We are Milwaukee's investigative team.
Because you matter.
All right, well, that's going to wrap things up for this week. We want to make sure that we also thank not just Carl for the story on Lulu Altman, but also...
So I had two great people working with me on this. Photojournalist Colin Schemenauer shot both the rehearsals and the performance, and then our editor that you guys know and love so well, Dave Machuda. This was a different piece. It was really involved both from a shooting and editing standpoint. It was almost cinematic in some ways because of what Dave was able to do with Colin's shots. We just wanted to give those two guys a special shout out. We got some talented coworkers here.
Absolutely. If you have a topic you would like us to discuss on Open Record or an issue you think we should investigate for Fox 6 News, send us an email to fox6investigators@fox.com. With that, thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Carl.
My pleasure.
Thank you to the people who make this podcast possible, including our editor, Dave Machuda, and the man behind the video switcher, that is Cale Zimney. With that, I'm Bryan Polcyn. We'll be back next week.